I learned very early what an apology looked like in my family. It sounded like, "I didn't mean it like that, sweetie." Or, "I get frustrated sometimes, but I love you." It came with a sigh, a soft tone, a hand on the shoulder, and it was never meant for me. Every apology in our house belonged to my sister. If voices were raised, she was the one soothed afterward. If feelings were hurt, hers were the ones carefully addressed. If lines were crossed, someone always rushed to make it right with her. I was expected to understand. "She didn't mean it," my mother would say. "You know how she is," my father added. "Just let it go," relatives chimed in. And so I did, over and over again. My sister, Lily, was 3 years older than me. She was expressive, emotional, intense, the kind of child adults described as strong-willed and sensitive. I was quiet, observant, careful, the kind of child who learned early that staying calm made life easier for everyone else. Somehow, that made me invisible. When Lily screamed, people apologized to her for upsetting her. When I cried, people asked what I'd done to provoke it. That was the pattern. So consistent, it didn't feel unfair at first. It felt normal. The first time I noticed it clearly, I was 11. Lily had borrowed my notebook without asking. It was one I kept hidden under my bed, filled with stories I was too shy to show anyone. When I found it later, pages were bent, the cover ripped, red ink scribbled through the margins. "What is this?" I asked, holding it up. She barely glanced at it. "Oh, relax," she said. "I was bored." My chest tightened. "I used where you ruined it," I said. She rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic." I raised my voice then, just slightly. "That was mine." Her face changed instantly. Anger, shock, offense. Next thing I knew, she was crying loudly, telling my mother I'd yelled at her for no reason. My mother rushed in, arms already open. "What happened?" she asked Lily gently. "She attacked me," Lily sobbed. "I was just looking at her stupid notebook and she lost it." My mother turned to me. "Why would you yell at your sister?" she asked, disappointment already settling in. I tried to explain. She held up a hand. "I don't want to hear it right now," she said. "Apologize." So I did. Lily sniffed dramatically while my mother rubbed her back. "I'm sorry you got yelled at," my mother told her. "She didn't mean to hurt your feelings." No one looked at me. No one asked about the notebook. No one apologized for the pages that could never be rewritten. That was the moment something quietly settled into place inside me. Apologies weren't about who was hurt. They were about who made things uncomfortable. And I learned quickly that my pain was easier to ignore. As we got older, the pattern only deepened. If Lily said something cruel, it was chalked up to stress. If I reacted, it was called disrespect. If Lily slammed doors, people gave her space. If I went quiet, people accused me of sulking. Somehow, she was always the one who deserved understanding. I was the one expected to supply it. By the time we were teenagers, Lily had mastered the art of emotional gravity. Every conflict bent toward her. If she snapped at me in front of others, someone later pulled her aside to check on her. If I corrected her, I was told to stop embarrassing her. Once, during a family dinner, she mocked the way I spoke, imitating my voice, exaggerating my words until everyone laughed. I felt my face burn. "Stop," I said. She smirked. "It's just a joke." My aunt leaned over. "Don't be so sensitive." Later that night, I overheard my mother comforting Lily in the kitchen. "She didn't appreciate the joke. She made it awkward." "I know," my mother replied softly. "I'm sorry she put you in that position." That apology echoed in my head for days. Not because it was loud, but because it wasn't meant for me. I stopped expecting apologies after that. I told myself I didn't need them. I became the one who let things go before they turned into something bigger. the one who apologized first, even when I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. It kept the peace, and peace, I was taught, mattered more than fairness. As adults, the pattern followed us. Lily had a way of saying sharp things and then acting wounded if anyone called her out. "She's just honest," people said. "She doesn't sugarcoat." If I pointed out something hurtful she'd said, she accused me of attacking her character. "You always make me the villain," she'd say. And somehow, people believed her. One Christmas, she criticized my career choice at the dinner table. "I just don't understand why you'd settle for something so small," she said casually, carving her turkey. I felt every eye turn toward me. "I like my work," I said quietly. She laughed. "Sure you do, but don't you want more?" I pushed back my chair slightly. "That was unnecessary," I said. Her fork clattered against her plate. "Oh, wow," she said. "I can't say anything without you getting offended." The mood shifted instantly. My father cleared his throat. My mother frowned at me. "Why do you always take things personally?" my mother asked. Lily crossed her arms, eyes glossy. "I was just trying to help," she said. "I'm sorry if she can't handle honesty." My mother turned to her. "I know you mean well," she said gently. "She's always been sensitive." Sensitive. The word followed me like a diagnosis. No apology came from me. Instead, Lily received another one for being misunderstood. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself apologies were just words. But the truth was, they shaped something much deeper. They taught Lily that her feelings mattered more. They taught me that mine were negotiable. And that belief followed me everywhere. I became someone who doubted my reactions. If I was hurt, I asked myself if I was overreacting. If I felt wronged, I wondered if I'd misunderstood. I gaslit myself so thoroughly that I barely noticed others doing it too. Because no one had ever apologized to me for hurting me. They'd only apologized to Lily for me reacting. The turning point didn't come during a fight. It came during a moment that was supposed to be joyful. Our grandmother's birthday, a big one. The entire family gathered at her house, laughter filling the rooms, old photos scattered across the table. Lily was holding court in the living room, telling a story that involved me. And then she just froze, Lily laughed, like she always does. Total deer in headlights moment. People chuckled. I smiled thinly. "That's not how it happened," I said quietly. Lily turned to me, eyebrows raised. "Oh," she said, "you remember it differently?" "Yes," I replied. "You embarrassed me." Her smile vanished. "You're doing this now at Grandma's birthday?" I felt the familiar pressure, the unspoken demand to back down. But something in me hesitated, because for once the room didn't feel tilted in her favor. Our grandmother had gone quiet. She was listening. "That's not fair," Lily said sharply. "I was joking. You always twist things." "I'm not twisting anything," I said, voice shaking. "You do this all the time." The room fell silent. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I can't believe you'd attack me like this," she said. "I try so hard with you." My mother stood up immediately. "Lily, honey," she said, moving toward her, "I'm sorry she's upsetting you." There it was, right on cue. But this time, something different happened. Our grandmother spoke. "Wait," she said. Everyone froze. She looked at Lily, then at me, and then she said something no one expected. "Why is it," she asked slowly, "that Lily always gets the apology, even when she's the one who started it?" The words landed like glass shattering. Lily's tears stopped mid-fall. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. The room was silent in a way I'd never felt before. And in that silence, something dangerous stirred. Because once the truth slips out, it doesn't go back in. No one spoke at first, not because they didn't hear what my grandmother said, but because they had, perfectly. The kind of silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was stunned, like the room had just shifted slightly off its axis and everyone was trying to regain their balance without admitting they felt it. Lily blinked rapidly, her tears still clinging to her lashes like they'd lost their purpose. "What?" she said, laughing weakly. "Grandma, you're confused." My grandmother didn't smile. "I'm not," she replied calmly. "I've been watching this dynamic for years." My mother stiffened beside the couch. "Mom," she said carefully, "this isn't the time." "This is exactly the time," my grandmother interrupted. Her voice wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It carried the authority of someone who had nothing left to lose by telling the truth. Lily turned to my mother instinctively, searching for rescue. "I was just joking. She's always taken things too seriously." There it was again, the same sentence repackaged, but this time it didn't land the way it used to. My grandmother leaned forward slightly in her chair. "And when she says she's hurt, why does no one take that seriously?" The question hung in the air. My mother opened her mouth, closed it. My father shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. No one answered.
I felt like I was floating. Not in a good way. In the way you do when something you've always known but never been allowed to say is suddenly said out loud by someone else. I hadn't asked my grandmother to defend me. I hadn't even looked at her for support. And yet here she was, naming the thing that had shaped my entire life. Lily laughed again, sharper this time. "So now I'm the bad guy?" she asked. "That's what this is?" "No one said that," my grandmother replied. "But you're not always the victim either." Lily's face hardened. "You don't understand how she talks to me when no one's around," she snapped, pointing at me. "She's cruel." I stared at her. Cruel? That was new. And yet, I wasn't surprised. My mother finally spoke. "She doesn't mean to hurt you," she said to Lily, reaching for her arm. "You know that." My grandmother's eyes flicked toward her. "And does she mean to hurt her?" she asked, nodding toward me. My mother froze. "That's different," she said slowly. "How?" my grandmother asked. Silence again. Longer this time. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. Part of me wanted to disappear, to shrink back into the familiar role of peacemaker, to apologize just to restore equilibrium. But something had cracked, and cracks let light in. "I've never asked anyone to apologize to me," I said quietly. Every head turned. My voice sounded foreign in my own ears, but I've watched people apologize to Lily my whole life, even when I was the one hurt. Lily scoffed. "That's not true." "It is," I said, louder now. "You just never noticed because it worked in your favor." Her eyes flashed. "You're rewriting history," she snapped. I shook my head. "I'm finally saying it out loud." My grandmother nodded slowly. "She's right," she said. "I remember when she was a child. She'd cry quietly in her room and no one went to check on her. Lily cried loudly and everyone rushed in." My mother looked stricken. "That's not fair," she said weakly. "Lily needed more support." "Why? Because she demanded it?" The words stung. Lily stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're all ganging up on me." No one moved.
That's when she realized something terrifying. For the first time in her life, no one was rushing to comfort her. I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not triumph, not revenge. Validation. The kind that makes your knees weak because you didn't realize how much you needed it. "I just wanted one apology," I said, my voice breaking despite myself. "One time for being hurt, for being dismissed, for being made to feel like I was the problem." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered. I looked at her. "You never asked," I said. The words weren't cruel, they were factual. Lily shook her head. "This is insane," she said. "You're all acting like I've been some monster." "No," my grandmother replied. "You've been protected." That landed harder than any accusation. Protected. Not evil, not malicious, just insulated.
The room buzzed with quiet discomfort. Old memories were surfacing for everyone now. Times they'd stepped in for Lily without asking questions. Times they'd dismissed my hurt as overreaction. Times they'd chosen the louder pain over the quieter one. You could see it on their faces. This wasn't just about us anymore. My father finally spoke. "I think maybe we did treat things unevenly," he said slowly. Lily spun toward him. "You too?" she demanded. He looked tired. "I think we got used to soothing the loudest fire and forgot there were others burning." Lily's mouth opened, closed. She looked around the room, realizing, too late, that the ground beneath her had shifted. She turned back to me. "So what?" she said, bitterly. "What, you want an apology now? Is that it?" I hesitated. The old me would have said no. The old me would have minimized my needs. But the truth had already slipped out. "Yes," I said, "I do." Her eyes widened slightly. "For what?" she asked.
"For dismissing me," I said, "for mocking me, for always acting like my pain was an inconvenience." She laughed harshly. "I never asked you to be so sensitive." Something inside me snapped cleanly into place. "And I never asked you to be cruel," I replied. The room went utterly still. My grandmother closed her eyes briefly. "This," she said softly, "is why the apology matters." Lily looked like she might cry again, but this time the tears didn't summon comfort. They hung there, unsupported. "I don't know how to be the bad one," Lily said quietly. My grandmother opened her eyes. "Then learn how to be accountable," she replied. No apology came that night. Not yet, but something far more important did. The story changed. For the first time, I wasn't the overly sensitive sister. I was the unheard one. And once that truth existed in the open, there was no going back to the old version of things. Because when the truth finally slips out, it doesn't just ask for apologies, it demands reckoning. The night ended without closure. No hugs, no apologies, no neat resolution that wrapped itself into a comforting bow. People left in small groups, voices low, eyes avoiding one another. The house that had been full of noise just an hour earlier felt hollow, like it had exhaled something it had been holding for decades. I stayed behind to help my grandmother into her room. She moved slowly, leaning on her cane, her face unreadable. "You okay?" I asked softly. She smiled at me, a tired but knowing smile. "I'm more than okay," she said. "I should have said something sooner." I swallowed. "You didn't have to," I replied. "Yes, I did," she said firmly. "Silence doesn't age well." Those words followed me all the way home. The next morning, my phone was already buzzing when I woke up. Missed calls, texts, family group chat notifications. The reckoning had begun. The first message was from my mother. "Can we talk today?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Yes. No explanation, no apology, just agreement. That alone felt like progress.
The second message was from my aunt. "I didn't realize how unfair things had been. I'm sorry." I read it twice. Then once more. It was short, imperfect, but it was the first apology I could ever remember receiving for how I'd been treated. My chest tightened. I typed back, "Thank you for saying that." I didn't add anything else. I didn't need to. The third message came from Lily. It was a single sentence. "You humiliated me." There it was. I set my phone down and let the words sit without responding. For years, I would have rushed to soften that, to explain, to apologize for making her feel bad. This time, I let it be hers to hold. When my mother came over that afternoon, she looked older, not physically, emotionally. She sat on my couch, hands clasped tightly together, eyes darting around like she didn't quite know where to begin. "I've been thinking all night,"
she said finally. I nodded. So have I. I didn't realize we were doing that, she continued, always apologizing to Lily, always expecting you to absorb things. I studied her face. Why? I asked quietly. She hesitated. Because Lily reacted loudly, she said, and you didn't. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. So my quiet made it easier to ignore me, I said. She flinched. Yes, she whispered. The admission hung between us. I thought I was teaching you resilience, she said. I thought you were stronger. I shook my head slowly. You taught me that my feelings were optional, I replied. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she said. The words were shaky, raw, unpracticed, but they were real. I exhaled deeply. Thank you, I said. It didn't erase the past, but it cracked it open. The conversation lasted hours, not arguing, unpacking. My mother admitted how overwhelmed she'd felt raising two very different daughters, how Lily's emotions scared her because they felt uncontainable, how my calm felt like relief she leaned on too heavily. I didn't protect you, she said quietly. I used you. That hurt, but it was also the truth. I don't want you to keep apologizing forever, I said. I want things to be different. She nodded. They will be, even if it's uncomfortable. That was the first time I believed her. Lily didn't reach out for days. When she finally did, it wasn't gentle. She showed up at my door without warning. Her eyes were red, her posture rigid. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside. She didn't sit, she paced. I can't believe you let Grandma say those things, she said. You turned everyone against me. I leaned against the counter. No, I said calmly. She told the truth. You could have stopped it, Lily snapped. I met her gaze. I stopped stopping it. She laughed bitterly. So now you're the victim, she said. Congrats. Something in me stayed steady. I was always the victim, I replied. You just didn't notice because you weren't the one hurting. She froze. That's not fair, she whispered. Neither was being told to apologize for your behavior my entire childhood, I said. Her breathing grew shallow. I didn't ask them to apologize to me, she said. No, I agreed. You just accepted it. She sank onto the chair. I don't know who I am if I'm not the one people rush to protect, she admitted. That was the first honest thing she'd said to me in years. I don't know who I am if I'm not the one who disappears, I replied. Silence filled the room. Not hostile, reflective. I didn't mean to hurt you, Lily said quietly. I believed her. I know, but that doesn't mean you didn't. She looked at me then, really looked. I thought you were fine. You never made a fuss. I nodded. Because I was taught that making a fuss meant losing love. Her face crumpled. I didn't know, she whispered. You didn't ask, I said gently. She covered her face with her hands. For the first time, her tears weren't a weapon. They were just tears. I don't know how to apologize, Lily said after a long moment. I studied her. Start by not defending yourself, I said, and by acknowledging what happened. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry, she said slowly, like the words were foreign in her mouth. I'm sorry for dismissing you, for mocking you, for acting like your feelings didn't matter. My chest tightened. She continued, voice shaking. And I'm sorry that everyone protected me instead of listening to you. That one broke something open. I sat down. I don't need you to become someone else overnight, I said. I need you to stop pretending this never happened. She nodded. I can do that, she said. I think. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. The family dynamic didn't magically heal after that. It shifted, awkwardly, unevenly. Some relatives overcorrected, constantly checking on me, apologizing for things they hadn't even done. Others stayed quiet, unsure how to engage now that the rules had changed. And Lily, she struggled. Without automatic apologies cushioning her every emotion, she had to learn how to sit with discomfort. It didn't come naturally, but she tried. One afternoon, weeks later, we were both at my parents' house when Lily snapped at me over something trivial. She caught herself mid-sentence, stopped, took a breath. "I'm sorry, that was unnecessary." I blinked. She looked uncomfortable, but she didn't retract it. She didn't explain it away. She didn't wait for someone else to soothe her. She owned it. I nodded. "Thank you," I said. That moment mattered more than the grand apology ever could. For me, something fundamental had changed. I no longer doubted my reactions. I no longer felt the need to justify my hurt. When something crossed a line, I named it.
And for the first time, people listened. Not because I was louder, but because the truth had already slipped out, and it refused to be ignored. One evening, my grandmother called. "You doing all right?" she asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "Better than I thought." She chuckled softly. "Good," she said. "Sometimes the truth causes a mess before it clears the air." "I know," I replied. She paused. "I'm proud of you," she said. The words settled warmly in my chest, not because I needed them, but because I finally believed them. My sister had always received the apologies I never got, until the truth finally slipped out. And once it did, the story changed, not just for me, but for everyone who'd been living inside it. Because truth doesn't just correct the past, it reshapes the future. The weeks after the truth came out were harder than the confrontation itself. I hadn't expected that. I thought once everything was said, once the pattern was named, once the apologies started to surface, things would feel lighter, cleaner, like finally setting down a weight I'd carried my whole life. Instead, it felt like learning how to walk without a brace I'd worn for decades. I wasn't used to being seen, and I wasn't used to not shrinking. The first thing that changed was how people watched me. At family gatherings, conversations slowed when I spoke, not because people were afraid, but because they were listening, really listening, as if they were suddenly trying to recalibrate around a voice they'd tuned out for years. At first, it made my skin crawl. I kept expecting someone to interrupt, to correct me, to reinterpret what I'd just said in a way that made it smaller or safer. It didn't happen, and the absence of that familiar dismissal felt almost unsafe. When you've lived a whole life preparing for impact, the quiet afterward can feel like standing on glass. My mother tried, clumsily, earnestly. She checked in more, asked questions she'd never asked before. Sometimes she overcorrected, hovering, apologizing for things that hadn't even happened yet. "I don't want to mess this up," she admitted one afternoon while we were folding laundry together. I smiled faintly. "You don't have to be perfect, you just have to stay present." She nodded, eyes glossy. "I wish I'd known sooner," she said. "So do I." But there was no accusation in it anymore, just truth. Lily, on the other hand, struggled in a way that was impossible to ignore. Without automatic apologies cushioning her every emotion, she seemed raw. She snapped more often at first, not just at me, but at everyone. Then she'd catch herself, freeze, and look around as if waiting for someone to soothe her. No one did. Not anymore. That silence wasn't punishment, it was recalibration, and watching her navigate it was uncomfortable for both of us. One evening, we were alone in the kitchen at my parents' house. She dropped a glass while washing dishes. It shattered loudly against the floor. She stiffened. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I wasn't paying attention." No one had even reacted yet.
I watched her hands tremble slightly as she reached for the broom. "You don't have to apologize for that," I said gently. She looked up, confused. "I don't?" she asked. I shook my head. "It was an accident." She laughed nervously. "Oh," she said, "right." The moment passed, but it stayed with me, because for the first time I could see how deeply she'd been shaped by the same system that had erased me. She'd been protected, but she'd also been conditioned. A few days later, Lily called me late at night. "I think I messed up again," she said quietly. I sat up in bed. "What happened?" I asked. "I said something stupid at work," she admitted, "and instead of fixing it, I got defensive. I waited for someone to reassure me. No one did." I could hear the confusion in her voice. "And it felt awful," she continued, "like I didn't know where to stand." I took a breath. "That feeling?" I said. "That's what accountability feels like at first." She was quiet. "I don't like it," she admitted. I smiled softly. "I didn't like silence," I replied. "But we both learned things that weren't fair." She sighed. "I don't know how to unlearn them," I said. "You don't have to all at once. Just notice when they show up." She whispered, "I'm trying." And for the first time in my life, I believed her. Not everyone adjusted gracefully. Some relatives still slipped into old habits, looking to Lily when emotions ran high, expecting me to smooth things over when tension crept in. But now, I didn't comply automatically. When someone said, "You know how she is," I replied calmly, "Yes, and this is how I am."
When someone asked me to just let it go, I said, "I don't need to." The world didn't collapse. People adjusted. Or they didn't. Either way, I stayed. The hardest moments came unexpectedly, not during arguments, but during kindness. One afternoon, my aunt pulled me aside and said, "I feel terrible for how we treated you." I nodded. Then she added, "You were always so easy." The old ache flared. "I wasn't easy," I said gently. "I was quiet because I didn't feel safe being loud." Her face fell. "Oh," she whispered. That one word carried more weight than any apology she could have offered. Inside me, something else was happening. I was angry. Not explosively, not destructively, but deeply. Angry at the years I'd spent doubting myself. Angry at the way I'd learned to self-abandon before anyone else could abandon me. Angry that it had taken my grandmother speaking up for anyone to notice. Therapy helped, journaling helped, but mostly honesty helped. I stopped gaslighting myself. When I felt hurt, I named it. When something felt wrong, I trusted that feeling. When I needed space, I took it, without apology. That was new and powerful. One afternoon, my grandmother asked me to come sit with her. She held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I've been thinking," she said, "about why I spoke up when I did." I smiled faintly. "I'm glad you did." She nodded. "I recognized myself in you," she said. "I was the quiet one too." That stopped me, cold. "I didn't know that," I said. She chuckled softly. "No one ever asked," she replied. "Back then, we were praised for endurance." She squeezed my hand. "But endurance without justice is just suffering in disguise." The words lodged themselves deep in my chest. The real shift came one evening when Lily and I argued. A real argument. Not the old kind where she exploded and I folded. This time, we both stood our ground. She accused me of assuming the worst of her. I told her I needed consistency, not just apologies.
She cried. I didn't rush to comfort her. I waited. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steadier.
I don't want to be the person who always gets protected, she said, but I don't know how to exist without it. I looked at her. You learn, I said, the same way I'm learning not to disappear. She nodded, and for the first time we stood in the same discomfort together. Slowly, the family system rewired itself. Not cleanly, not perfectly, but intentionally. Apologies became less automatic and more thoughtful. People asked more questions before taking sides. When Lily was upset, they listened, but they didn't rush to absolve her. When I was hurt, they didn't ask me to justify it. That change didn't erase the past, but it changed the future. One night, months later, I realized something startling. I felt calm. Not because everything was fixed, but because I was no longer invisible. The apology I'd waited for my whole life hadn't just come from Lily. It had come from the world finally seeing me as someone whose pain mattered. And even more importantly, I had stopped needing permission to believe that myself. The truth had slipped out, and once it did, it rewrote the rules. Silence was no longer mistaken for strength. Loudness was no longer mistaken for fragility. And apologies were no longer currency reserved for one person alone. I didn't get back the years of dismissal, but I gained something far more valuable, my voice. And this time, I wasn't giving it back. The final apology didn't come the way I once imagined it would. There was no dramatic confession, no family meeting where everyone sat in a circle and took turns admitting their mistakes, no single moment that neatly tied everything together. Instead, it came in fragments, and strangely enough, those fragments were stronger than any scripted apology could have been. The first fragment came on an ordinary afternoon. I was at my parents' house, sitting at the kitchen table, helping my mother sort through old papers, bills, manuals, folded notes tucked away in drawers for no reason other than habit. Lily was there too, leaning against the counter, scrolling on her phone. At one point, my mother paused and looked at a form in her hands. "This reminds me," she said casually, "you were right about that situation last year." I looked up.
Which one? I asked. She met my eyes. The argument you and Lily had, the one where I told you to drop it. My chest tightened. I should have listened to you, she continued. I didn't, and I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was specific. And that mattered. Lily looked up from her phone. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend herself. She just listened. That, too, mattered. The second fragment came a week later. Lily and I were driving together, something we hadn't done alone in years. The car felt like a neutral zone, movement smoothing the tension that usually sat between us. Out of nowhere, she said, "Do you remember when we were kids and I ruined your notebook?" My hands tightened slightly on my lap. "Yes," I said. She swallowed. "I never apologized for that," she said quietly. I waited. "I didn't think it mattered," she continued. "I thought you'd just get over it." I stared out the window. "I didn't," I said. "I know," she replied. The car hummed with road noise. "I'm sorry," she said again. "Not just for that. For a lot of things I pretended didn't count." She didn't look at me. She didn't wait for reassurance. She just let the words exist. I felt something in my chest ease. Not all the way, but enough. The third fragment came from myself. That one took the longest. For weeks, I noticed how often I still minimized my needs automatically, how I softened statements before anyone reacted, how I apologized preemptively for having feelings,
how I braced for dismissal even when none came. Patterns don't disappear just because they're named. They loosen slowly. One day, during a conversation with Lily, she said something sharp, not cruel, but careless. The old me would have swallowed it. Instead, I said, "That hurt." She froze. "I didn't mean," she started. I raised a hand gently. "I know," I said, "but it still did." She nodded.
"I'm sorry," she said. "Thank you for telling me." That was it. No spiral, no collapse, no guilt parade, just acknowledgement. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was asking for too much. As months passed, the family dynamic continued to shift. Not everyone adapted equally. Some relatives still defaulted to old roles when stress hit. Some still flinched when I spoke directly. Some clearly missed the version of me that made things easier. But I didn't chase that version anymore. I let people adjust or not. And I stayed. Lily changed in ways that surprised me. She didn't become softer overnight. She was still intense, still expressive, still opinionated. But she stopped assuming the room owed her comfort. When she snapped, she owned it. When she was hurt, she said why. When she was wrong, she didn't wait for someone else to smooth it over. It was awkward, sometimes painful, but it was real. And real was something we'd never had before. One evening, months after everything unraveled, Lily and I sat together on the back porch of my parents' house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in muted colors. She spoke first. "I used to think apologies were weakness," she said, "like admitting fault meant losing ground." I nodded. "I thought silence was strength, like needing less made me better." She smiled sadly. "Turns out we were both wrong," she said. "Yes, in opposite directions." She looked at me. "I don't want to be the person who always gets forgiven without changing," she said, "and I don't want you to be the one who never gets acknowledged." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Then we'll have to keep choosing differently," I said. She nodded. "I'm willing," she said. That mattered more than perfection ever could. My grandmother lived long enough to see the shift take root. One afternoon, I sat with her while she rested, her hand folded over mine. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel lighter," I replied. She smiled softly. "That's what truth does," she said. "It takes weight off the quiet ones." I squeezed her hand. "Thank you for speaking up," I said. She chuckled softly.
"I didn't just speak for you," she replied. "I spoke for myself too." That was when I understood something important. This wasn't just my story, it was generational. The biggest change, though, was internal. I stopped second-guessing my memories, stopped asking myself if I was too much, stopped needing external validation to believe my pain was real. When I felt hurt, I trusted it. When I needed space, I took it. When something crossed a line, I named it. Not aggressively, not apologetically, just clearly. That clarity became its own kind of peace. I no longer needed apologies to survive, but when they came, real ones, grounded in accountability, I could receive them without shame. And when they didn't, I didn't collapse, because I had already given myself the one I'd waited for my whole life. My sister always received the apologies I never got, until the truth finally slipped out. And when it didn't just change how others treated me, it changed how I treated myself. I learned that silence isn't maturity, that loudness isn't vulnerability, that peace built on imbalance isn't peace at all. Real peace is messy. It requires discomfort, accountability, and the courage to stay present when the old roles fall apart. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I arrived as myself, fully, unedited. And once I did, something remarkable happened.
I was no longer waiting for apologies because I was no longer invisible.